Hello everyone, hope you're doing alright, I hope you're keeping safe and I hope you're keeping sane. Now this video is a bit of a follow-up to one I did a little while ago where I talked about signs that you might be developing a gambling addiction. So things to look out for which might give you an indication that you're in that group of at-risk people who may be more susceptible to developing a problem of that kind. In that video I said I would make a follow-up to enable people who are maybe the partners of problem gamblers to maybe identify the early warning signs that someone has a problem or is at risk of developing a gambling addiction. In this video I will use myself and my wife as an example, and I will refer to partners predominantly, but this will also apply to sort of other family members, maybe for close friends or other people that you might be concerned about. So like I say, whilst I'll generally refer to partners and I'll normally refer to the gambler as a he, because that was mine, since of course that was me, this will apply both ways. And actually it's worth noting that the proportion of problem gamblers that are female is actually increasing, particularly here in the UK, and it's no surprise really, because the gambling industry have subsequently and consistently seen this as an untapped resource and have continued to target more and more this group of potential female gamblers. So like I say, in this video I'll be referring to the gambler as he. I'll be talking predominantly about partners, but this will apply to both sexes and to friends, family members and other people as well. I will of course put a caveat on it and say that just because someone is demonstrating these signs, it doesn't necessarily mean they have a gambling problem, and likewise just because they're not demonstrating these signs doesn't mean they don't. So if in doubt, I guess communication is always going to be the problem, and I will start right there. I will start with communication, and I will start with defensiveness, and this is something that I demonstrated historically a huge amount whenever the subject of gambling was brought up. Now my wife knew that I gambled. I didn't make any secret of it at all. I mean, I did cover up the amount, the extent and the amount of time I was spending gambling, but she knew that I gambled. She knew I had a bet on the football, she knew I had a bet on the darts, she knew that I played fruit machines occasionally. I don't think she really knew that I went to the bookies and stuff like that, but she did know that I gambled. However, I would find myself getting increasingly defensive whenever I was questioned about it or confronted about it in any small way. For example, if I was out with my wife, having a pub meal or something like that, and she went to the ladies, I would maybe have a quick go on the fruit machine. Now, when she came back, if she showed any element of disdain for what I was doing, was saying, couldn't wait or whatever, then I would probably flare up a little bit. I would get unreasonably defensive about my actions. And if at any point you're talking to your partner about gambling in any capacity, and they seem to be getting a little bit defensive or a little bit agitated talking about the subject, then that could be a little bit of a red flag that they are at least, subconsciously creating a sort of defense mechanism that they are maybe even unaware of. I spoke in a previous video about how whenever, even to this day, I'm questioned about where I've been or what I've been doing, my brain will subconsciously kick in and go into full-blown defence mode, even though I've not got anything to cover up now. But I was lying for so long and for so many years to cover up my gambling addiction that it becomes a bit of a reflex. It becomes an automatic response to want to lie whenever you're questioned about your behaviours, where you've been, what you spent your money on, or anything that you'd need to do to protect this addiction. So if your partner becomes agitated whenever you speak about gambling in any capacity, then that could be a warning sign. I would extend that out and say whenever you talk about money. If your partner becomes defensive about money, regardless of what the actual conversation's about, it doesn't have to be a conversation about gambling or even about their expenditure particularly. But if they become defensive about money, then that could be a bit of a red flag. I will give you a couple of examples from myself. When I was still gambling, me and my wife had a credit card that we used together. Now, it was actually in her name, but it had a particularly high limit on it. So we used that for household expenses and also for things that we did together. So if we were to go away, we might put the hotel on the card and then pay it off or whatever. Now, naturally, every month the bill went to her, and it was my job to give her half the money or whatever to help pay the credit card bill. Seems fair enough. But she always said to me, why do you get so funny when I ask you for the credit card money? It came in every month and I paid it every month. But she said to me that every time she asked and said, oh, could you just transfer that money for the credit card? That I always used to appear to get quite agitated and quite defensive. And she said she could see a real shift in my mood. Now, I probably wasn't even aware of this. But she said, yes, she could see in me that whenever she asked me about just, can you transfer over the credit card money? I would get really defensive. She said, why do you get so funny about it? I'm not funny about it at all. And again, get really defensive. So if whenever you talk about money, your partner or friend or family member, whatever, gets unnaturally defensive or seems agitated or there is a shift in their mood, then that is potentially a sign that they have a problem with gambling or potentially a different addiction altogether. Lying. Now, lying is something I've spoken about consistently, and it's the biggest catalyst for a gambling addiction. Lying enables us to perpetuate this addiction. Lying enables us to continue gambling. It allows us to cover up this secretive addiction, this solitary addiction. Gambling, as we know, has no outward physical symptoms, unlike many other addictions. And lying allows us to cover up the psychological and emotional symptoms, the behavioural symptoms that maybe would give away the fact we have a gambling addiction. Now, the lies don't necessarily have to seem to be directly related to gambling, but if you have concerns that your partner has an addiction of this type, or indeed of any type, and you discover that they're lying about even seemingly inconsequential things, like where they've been, who they've been out with, what time they were going to be home, and stuff like that, things that don't really seem necessarily on the surface of it particularly important, then maybe that could be another red flag. Mood swings. If your partner seems to have irregular mood swings, they seem to have an inconsistent or increasingly large or proportionally large number of bad days at work. If they come home in a bad mood and they say they've had a bad day at the office, troublesome clients, whatever, arguments with colleagues, whatever the excuse is, if the proportion of bad days to good days at the office seems to be getting more and more frequent, and you know again that they're gambling, particularly if they're working late, and they're working late for whatever reason, but they've had a bad day and they're in a bad mood, but you know they're gambling, then again that could be another red flag. Like I say, any lies can be a red flag. Secretiveness. Now, I will use a very specific example here, but I would say the secretiveness around mobile phone use. Now, of course, this is a good time to mention that a lot of these symptoms that we have when we're covering up a gambling addiction or trying to disguise and hide a gambling addiction from our partners or whatever are very similar to those of someone who might be having an affair. I have heard from a number of people who've said they actually thought their partner was having an affair because of the way they were behaving, being very secretive, with their mobile phones, being very secretive with the use of their laptops, being very vague about where they've been or why they're late home or why they had to stay late for work. These are all symptoms of both an addiction but also potentially an affair. It's also a good point at which to mention that if you don't pick up on these symptoms, or you've discovered that your partner's been gambling or had a gambling addiction or has caused themselves a lot of financial damage or whatever through an addiction, and you haven't identified these symptoms historically, that is not your fault. I just touched upon the fact it's a very secretive addiction, and as gamblers, the longer we gamble, the better and better we become at covering up this addiction, the more naturally the lies come to us. The bigger range of excuses that we develop in our heads, the ability to generate really far-fetched, intangible scenarios in our head as to why we're late, why we've been out for longer than we said we'd be, why we're skint, why we're so good at it. And that's not a good thing, but we've become so accustomed to lying. So if you have discovered that your partner's got a gambling addiction, you're thinking, why? Why didn't I pick up on these symptoms? Don't blame yourself. My wife has said to me before, as I mentioned in a previous video, she felt foolish. She felt really stupid. She said to me, which hurt me the most, she said she felt really stupid because she felt that she should have seen this. She knew I gambled. So why didn't she identify that this was becoming a problem? Because I was bloody good at covering it up. And that's, trust me, that's not self-aggrandizing. I'm not proud of it. I'm desperately, desperately ashamed of the fact that I kept all this from my wife. But if you have discovered that your partner's gambling and you feel that way, then don't, because it's not your fault. But what I would say very, very quickly, because it's a bit off topic, is if you have discovered that your partner's gambling, particularly if you're if you're married or you share finances or share children or anything where you have a financial, or legal tie to that person, then protect yourself. If you've discovered they have a gambling problem, then protect yourself. Make sure your children, make sure your finances are protected. If you want to stay with that person, you want to help them work through it, that's great. That's up to you, and that's not for me to sort of say one way or the other. But protect yourself, look after yourself. Anyway, secretiveness. Secrecy, that's a better word. Secrecy. If you find your partner is on their phone a lot more than normal, but doesn't want to tell you what they're doing, or, as I maybe used to do when I was playing the online casinos on my phone, I'm just saying, I'm just playing a game. Or they'll even tread that wire and say, oh yeah, it's just like a slot machine game. When actually I was playing real slots online for real money. I say, oh, it's just a slot machine game. If they're playing a game when they should be there with you, watching a film, watching the telly, even just talking about your day or spending time together, and they're distracted by a game, would you be distracted by a game? I know people get addicted to things like Candy Crush and what have you, but if someone is that intent on playing a game when they could be doing something far more important, okay, maybe it's not even necessarily going to be a guarantee of a gambling addiction, but certainly it's a guarantee of some sort of addiction or some sort of problem. So that should be very much a red flag. There's so many of these, honestly. An increased interest, one I touched upon in another previous video, an increased interest in a sport they previously had no interest in. Are you finding that your partner is staying up till ridiculous o'clock to watch the golf or watch the snooker? Or have they taken a previously unrecognisable interest in darts? Maybe this could be a sign that they're actually only interested in the gambling side of the sport. Maybe they're using this pretense, this front of interest in a new sport or an increased interest in a sport they've always had a little interest in. Maybe they're using this as an affront to gamble. Maybe they're only interested in that sport because they've got money riding on that game, or they're betting in play constantly. If they are watching TV, watching a sport, but they seem to be more interested in their phone, does this mean they're betting in play? Does this mean they're gambling on the outcome of the next hole, the next leg, the next set, the next whatever, depending on whatever the sport is? If they're interested, say they're a football fan, they're a Liverpool fan. Someone has to be, right? Apologies to any Liverpool fans. They're a Liverpool fan, but you find they're desperately interested when they're watching Soccer Saturday with Jeff and the boys. They're suddenly desperately interested in the score between like Colchester and Exeter. Why would that be? Well, to me, there would be only one reason why someone would be interested in a score line between two teams they care nothing about. And that would be because they have some other interest in them. And if you know they're a gambler, that's probably why. It might be safe to ask and say, look, have you got money on that? I would say if they say yes, that's probably less of a red flag than if they say no. Like I say, the second you identify that they are lying about their gambling in any capacity, even if you know they're gambling, but they're not telling you the extent to which they're gambling, then that to me is a massive red flag. As gamblers, we lie to those around us, but we also lie to ourselves, and we try and play down and belittle our own addiction. It's under control. I can stop any time I want. If you ever hear any of those lines, that's a huge red flag, right? If someone says to you, if your partner says to you, yes, I gamble, but it's not a problem, I could just stop any time I want. It's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves. It's one of the biggest lies we tell each other, so be on your guard for these things. I hope that helps. I'm sure when I stop recording this video, I'll think of lots and lots more. It's not a definitive guide. And I say, it's no cast iron guarantee that your partner has a problem, but what you should do is talk. Always, communication is always the key. And maybe they don't want to talk about it. But if they don't want to talk about it, then I'd say that's probably more of a red flag. If they get agitated whenever you talk about the subject of gambling, that should be a red flag. But look after yourselves, protect yourselves, and don't ever, ever blame yourselves if you haven't identified historically the fact that your partner's got a gambling problem, because we're bloody good liars. And like I say, this does apply as well to friends, family members, other people that you might care about, other people that you might be concerned about. Last thing I'll very quickly say on this subject matter is, unfortunately, even if you can identify that your partner, friend, family member has a gambling addiction, cast iron guarantee, you know it, you can't do anything about it until they want to do something about it. You can confront them, and you should protect yourself, and you should, if you want to give them an ultimatum, from the other side, I don't think that's a bad thing to do, but everyone's different. But you cannot make them change until they want to change. They have to want to get help, they have to want to make a change in their life, and they have to want to quit. And without that want, all the need in the world won't make them stop. Take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, stay safe, stay sane. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.